Hello my quilting friends! Leah Day here with a new video for the machine quilting party. Today we're quilting crazy curves. It's basically taking just simple curving lines but quilting them completely freeform all over your quilt. It looks great. Not only that, it's very fast and easy to stitch. So let's jump on the machine and give this a try with walking foot style quilting. So I'm already quilting some crazy curves, and you can see it's just a totally random design, just freeform curves, however you want to stitch them, however far apart you feel like spacing the lines. And this is one of those designs that can actually be kind of tricky. Whenever you're randomly spacing curves like this, it can sometimes be easy to put too much pressure on your quilt and start to see some whiskering and kind of torque across the surface. So be careful about that. Whenever you accidentally quilt a deeper curve, whether it's an accident or maybe intentional, make sure to stop, needle in the down position, lift your foot and kind of release any pressure that's building up underneath your foot. Sometimes when you're stitching at an angle for a length of time, so like right here, I'm going to just go on the diagonal for a good bit, that can just subtly start to pull the fabric in one direction. So lift up on that foot and that's going to release it. Plus it's going to help you make nice smooth curves. Here I'm going to aim for a deeper curve. And there's kind of a balance of speed and movement. Notice that I'm running the machine fairly fast and I'm also moving my hands fairly slow. So you want to try and find that balancing act between speed and movement. And if you're having trouble and you're seeing some issues with your quilt, just simply slow down. Stitch a little slower, lift the foot, rotate, stitch a few more stitches, lift the foot, rotate, and just work it like that. And that might not only be easier, and it's going to be a little slower, but it's going to result in fewer issues if you start seeing some whiskering or pleating on your quilt. This was something that I struggled with the first time I stitched this design, and I just started seeing that issue and I was like, well, what's going on? And the only thing I could think of is I was just stitching a little too fast and being a little too heavy-handed with the quilt. So just watch out for that. This is a really free-form design, and as you can see, it stitches up pretty fast. You can vary your stitch length. So here I'm backing up a good 1.5 inches from my other line. Roll up the quilt here and slide it into the back of the machine. And then because of that nice spacing, I can do some funky stuff out here, just kind of wiggling back and forth. And it's gonna look okay because the design is meant to be inconsistent. So it's okay if some lines are much further apart than others. As far as your quilting scale, you're gonna kind of just aim for a general distance. So let's say you have a batting that says quilting up to 4 inches. Well, obviously you don't want to leave any spaces in your quilt that's bigger than 4 inches, but you could kind of vary with crazy curves between 2 inches and 3 inches, and maybe bring some lines even closer together, like down to 1/2 inch, just for variety. And that would be perfectly fine, and that would result in a pretty secure quilt and a nice looking design on the surface. You just kind of have to play with it and see, number one, how many lines of quilting do you want to put on your quilt? How much stitching do you want to do? And then going from there, finding a design that's going to give you the effect that you're wanting to see on the surface. This is such a free-form, fluid design. It's going to be great for quilts that need that little extra movement. I used this in the background of one of my wonky Christmas tree quilts last year, and it was a great choice. It added an effect almost like snow. And I did that in free motion quilting, but obviously you can also stitch it with your walking foot too. So now let's try crazy curves with ruler foot quilting. This is a special foot. It's a type of darning foot that has a circular base and it's thick, so you can press a ruler or template right up against it in order to quilt along that shape. So I'm going to be quilting with this slide, mini slide and super slide. Both of these are curvy rulers with really nice continuous curves on both sides. So what I'm going to do is switch out to ruler foot quilting, and the settings that I use for this, I set my stitch length down to 0 or the lowest setting. That just simply minimizes the movement of the feed dogs, and then I cover the machine bed with a queen size Supreme slider. I don't drop my feed dogs. Of course you can if you want to, but this is just the settings that I use whenever I'm doing free motion quilting or ruler foot quilting. Okay, so now I'm going to press my ruler right up against the edge of the foot and begin stitching. And I'm pressing the foot against the ruler and pushing the quilt through the machine all at the same time. And I do have some true grips here that I've stuck to the bottom of the ruler that helps to grip the fabric. And you want that grip because you really don't want the ruler to slip out of position and away from you. You want it to grip the fabric so that you're pushing down on it, you're pushing down on the quilt sandwich, and you're pushing this hand, just kind of guiding it straight through the machine all at the same time. And as you can see, I'm going to finish up this line and I'll show you my stitches. The major difference here, I mean, this might look quite a bit like walking foot quilting in the sense that I'm pushing the quilt through the machine in a very straight way, and the only difference here being that I'm using a smaller foot and this ruler as a guide. But there's another major difference, and that is I could go off and do anything I want to. This is a form of free motion quilting, so if I wanted to, I could then, you know, go off and do some stippling, and that would be perfectly fine. I can also quilt in all directions, so let's say that it's most comfortable for me to stitch this way. I'm going to back up just a bit to put a little bit more space between those lines. And let's say it would be the most comfortable for me to quilt this way. I don't particularly like this direction, but as you can see, I can stitch in it. I can stitch from left to right if I wanted to. And I'm only limited here, as you can see, I'm hitting up against the harp space on the machine, the motor of the machine itself. So then I can reposition the ruler. And this is a continuous curve, meaning if you can kind of locate where you were on one end, so I was about right here on this end, if I can kind of position it similarly or flip the ruler, flip the ruler around, then you can lock back into that curve and continue that exact shape. There we go. So that works too. But honestly, this feels a little awkward, and as you can probably tell, my stitch length is fluctuating. Let me zoom in so you can really see this. The stitch length is the size of each individual stitch. This is part of the advantage. This is one of the major advantages of walking foot quilting, is the fact that all of the stitches are the same size and shape. With free motion quilting or with ruler foot quilting, you're not going to have that advantage because the size and shape of the stitches are being formed by a combination of two things: by the speed of your hands moving and pushing the quilt. Oops, I need to flip that ruler over. There we go. And so me pushing the quilt through the arm of the machine, that's forming the stitches, and then that in relation to how fast the machine is going. So it's two things forming those stitches. And so it's a balancing act, and it's not going to be perfect. As you can see, some of my stitches are fluctuating. Some of them are getting big, some of them are getting small. I'm having an occasional little kind of a blip, you know, little wiggly spot whenever I move my ruler around a little bit. None of that is a deal breaker in my opinion. If you're in a hurry, as you can see, this is a little bit faster. So I don't think this is a deal breaker. It's just good to understand that there's upsides and downsides to every form of quilting that you do. Okay, I'm going to switch to the super slide ruler. This gives you a lot bigger curves. And just angle down. And I like this bigger ruler because, as you can see, you can cover more distance with it. Occasionally I'll need to shift my hands downward. But it really gives you a nice big curve, a lot of distance. Now if you stop with these rulers on one mark from the edge, then that's where they continue. And you line up the ruler, once you shift it down, line up with that mark 1/4 inch from the edge, and that's where the lines continue. That's where you get that beautiful continuous curve that you can quilt anywhere on your quilts. So there we go. That is Crazy Curves. stitched with ruler foot quilting and walking foot quilting. And here's what it looked like whenever I finished this quilt square. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned a lot quilting crazy curves with me today. You know, if you take this design and you stitch it both vertically and horizontally, you'll create another design, a grid design I call Crazy Matrix. And this is even more fun because it covers your quilt with a wiggly freeform grid. Now we'll be learning this design coming up soon, so make sure to join in the fun of the machine quilting party and follow along with the videos shared every week. You can learn more about this quilt along at leahday.com/2018party. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube so you don't miss the next video coming out soon. Until next time, let's go quilt!